I don't know. Oh, maybe. Oh, yeah, I can do that. I can put it over the top of him. Okay, that works perfect. Okay, so we're talking today about how a president is elected. And I know I told you guys to watch that information on the Electoral College, but today we're going to go through like the specific information on how a president gets elected because it's kind of a complicated process. Hi, Lexi. Everybody can hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Okay, so today we're looking at the process the executive branch uses to govern. And I just did a Wednesday to-do list for today because this week's just been kind of weird for me. So today you're going to read, or the lesson is on chapter 10, lesson 3. We're talking about the Electoral College and the road to the presidency. And then if we have time, I'll for sure just show you, actually, I'll just show them to you. So if you were to click on these two things, the Electoral College and should we replace the Electoral College, what it'll do is it'll bring up two slides, or two little articles, and they're just kind of summaries of the Electoral College and what that's all about, which it's in your book, but this one is more, like you said, it's in plain English, like it says here. And this one is, should we replace it? And we've already had some discussion in class about that, about if the Electoral College is a good thing or not. But it's there for you guys to look at, and I just want to show you this. So when you're looking at popular votes, so how many people voted in an election, there have been 4 elections so far where the winner did not actually get the popular vote. Going back to 1876 with Rutherford B. Hayes, 1888 to Benjamin Harrison, and then much more recently with George Bush in 2000 and Donald Trump in 2016. And if you look at that, Bush's race was very close to Al Gore. In fact, they had to do a recount in Florida because that was the deciding state to see who would win. If you look here, the electoral vote, we're going to talk about that today and how you get to that number. If you look here in 1876, it was even closer. Now, if you go down to Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton actually beat him by like 3 million votes, but yet he still became president. And it has to do with this whole Electoral College thing. So that's what I'm going to explain today. So hopefully it makes sense when we're done with class today, how that Electoral College vote works. And then maybe we'll have time for a little discussion on if that's good or bad. All right, from Monday, these are just review questions. What are the formal qualifications and informal qualifications to be president? What are some responsibilities of the vice president? And be able to list in order who would become president after the vice president. So elections, this is just some general information, and there's actually a little link here. So if you want to see where you would vote, if you were 18 now or where your family would vote, you can click there and check it out. But this year is a general election, which means it's a regular election where voters choose the office holders versus an off election year. The off election years would be so every 2 years that aren't a presidential election. And those are between so in 2022, there will be an off-year election, and in that election, we'll be voting for one of our state senators, all of our state congresspeople, and mayor in Wisconsin. How are ballots cast and what's an absentee ballot? We're going to talk about that. Where do you vote? Well, you vote in a precinct, which is your individual voting district. And in Monroe, if you go to vote downtown, what you'll see there is there's actually a map of the city of Monroe, and it's labeled by precincts. So I don't know how many there are in Monroe, maybe a dozen. And you would find what precinct you're in. When I lived in town, I was in number 3. So then I would go, there are tables set up. So there's, I don't know, however many precincts there are tables set up with voting people that help. And you go to your precinct and they give you your ballot then. And then you go and just, you fill in your ballot and you vote. So polling places where voters vote, and it might be more than one precinct that meets there, but in a big city, even like say Madison, which isn't huge, but it's bigger, each precinct in Madison would have its own voting place. This year, the presidential election is on November 3rd. So next week, Tuesday, is election day. And we'll probably spend some time in class on Tuesday watching stuff that's going on with the election. For those of you that'll be here in class, we'll do that live. And then for those of you online, I'll screen share and we'll probably do some talking about what's happening that day. Since it only happens every 4 years, your instructor gets pretty excited when she's able to like share that stuff live. But it's always the first weekend in November for presidential elections and the off-year elections. We also oftentimes will have elections in April, and those are usually the primaries, but they can be for other things. So this is just a cartoon about the path to the White House. Does anybody want to share what they think this means? So to get elected, what do you have to do to get to the White House? What is this a picture of? Anyone?
Isn't it taking you through like all the paths and challenges of everything in order to get in?
Yep, absolutely. So I think Lexi shared it's a maze, and Jessica said it's all the little things you have to go through to get there. And it's exactly that. It's not just you run for president, people vote for you and you're president. There's a lot more involved than that. Okay, the Electoral College itself is a group of electors who are chosen to elect a president and vice president every 4 years. And then this is a link to that article. It's a winner-take-all situation where whoever gets to 270 votes in the Electoral College wins. And hopefully this link works. Oh, but let's see, hold on. Okay, I lied because here's the deal. I've got to, because of the sound thing, I might have to do that. Okay, just give me a second. I'm sorry, this is just weird because of copy this. I'm going to mail it to myself.
Hey, Miss Davis.
Yeah, sorry.
I wasn't sure if you knew I was in.
Yep, I saw you. Okay, I want to send to myself. Where's my little send button? Oh, it's down here. How do I get to it? There we go. Sorry.
You could hide one of them.
No, I think I got it now. I have to play the sound on one, and I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll try it. Stop. All right. I'm sorry, you guys. Now I gotta bring this video up.
Every 4 years, Americans who are 18 or older have a... Every 4 years, Americans who are 18 or older have a big responsibility. Our votes decide who becomes the President of the United States. Unfortunately, the U.S. election system isn't that simple. This is electing a U.S. president in plain English. It's easy to imagine every U.S. citizen's vote being counted together on Election Day, but this is not the case. U.S. elections are not decided by the total or popular vote, but individual states. Let me explain. It starts with your vote. On Election Day, you'll vote for president and their vice president. You get one choice. Then, all the votes in your state are counted. The candidate with the most statewide votes becomes the candidate your state supports for president. This happens across the country until each state has selected their candidate. We end up with most of the 50 states and the District of Columbia voting to support one candidate each. But there's a problem. We can't elect a president by just counting up the choices of these states. U.S. states are different. Consider this. California has about 36 million people. Kansas has less than 3 million. We need a way for California's choice to have more influence on the election because the state has more people. The question becomes, how do we make sure each state has the right amount of influence on the election? Well, we need a way to account for the population of each state. As an example, let's consider my home state of North Carolina. Like every state, it is divided up into congressional districts that are based on population. North Carolina has 13 districts, California has 53, and Kansas has 4. When it comes to a state's influence on the election, the number of districts matters most. More population equals more districts equals more influence. The influence a state has in the election is measured by the number of electors. This number comes from the number of districts in a state plus the number of U.S. senators, which is always 2. North Carolina has 15 electors, while California has 55. When a candidate wins the voting in a state, they win that state's number of electors. That's why big, populous states can be so important to candidates. Their electors add up quickly, and the number of electors is what really matters. Here's why. If you add up the electors of all 50 states in the District of Columbia, there are 538 in total. The candidate's goal on Election Day is to win the majority of 538, or 270 electors. Once a candidate wins enough states to reach the 270 majority, they have won the election and become the president-elect. Yay! So, let's recap. Your vote helps your state choose a single candidate. That candidate receives all the electors from your state. The candidate who can win enough states to reach 270 total electors wins the national election and becomes the president-elect. Then, on the following January 20th, the president-elect is sworn in as the next president of the United States. And it all starts with your vote. Make it count. I'm Lee Lefevre, and this has been Electing a U.S. President in Plain English on the Common Core.
Okay. So hopefully that made sense. This is all in your book, but I think for me, watching like videos like that make it a lot easier to understand by looking at that visual. Okay, so this is the Electoral College explained. Why do we have it? It started back in when we first wrote our Constitution because people didn't believe that the common person would be able to make good decisions. So that actual electors from the state voted for president. Obviously, that's changed over time with, being able to see television and access media and things like that. One reason we should keep the Electoral College? Feel free to pipe in if you guys want. This gives small states some voice in the election process. The problem is it goes back to why shouldn't we keep it? Is that sometimes the person that's elected doesn't win the popular vote. How does this influence our government and our life? That maybe is a decision or something that you guys can make. The video mentioned that Maine and, I forget the other state. 2 states in our nation, I think it's Nebraska, don't give all of their votes to one candidate. And I think the Electoral College would work fine and I mentioned this in class before. So Wisconsin has 10 votes. If Trump gets 60%, he should get 6 of the votes and the other candidate should get 4 of the votes. I think that's the way it should run, and then our electoral college would be much more fair. So the road to electing a president is a long one. I don't think you need to deep read everything that's in your book on this because there's a lot, but it mentions these things. The first thing is a PAC, and we talked about this before. This is a lobbying group. PACs are those things that join together to give money for financial support. An example would be the NRA. The National Rifle Association. It's an organization in itself, and they also have a political action committee which sends their money in to support a candidate. And they can be very influential because some of those big PACs make a lot of money and are able to give a lot of money to candidates, which allows them to do things like advertise, send out flyers in the mail. Ask your parents. I bet you've gotten 100 different flyers in the mail from the different candidates. The FEC is an independent agency, and what it does is it enforces election laws, of which there are many. We're not going to go through all the intricacies, but basically only so much money can come from certain places. It's to make it more fair. So let's say a poor candidate is running for president. Obviously, President Trump would be able to afford more because he can spend as much of his own money. So the FEC just makes it a little bit more fair for all the candidates that are running. And that goes not just for president, that goes for all elections. You have 3 levels of convention or of the election process also before you actually get to that general election. The first is the primary, and that's, you guys might remember this from, it would have been last year. You have maybe 20 people running for president on the Democratic ticket. I don't know, there were probably other people running on the Republican ticket, but generally your incumbent president, so that would be President Trump, he's going to win that. He's going to get the support of his party to be the candidate. On the opposite end, the Democratic Party, like I said, had about 20 different candidates. So each state has a primary. And in that primary, the state votes on who they want from their party to run for president. Then we have a caucus. It's an event held before an election where members of the political party select delegates to send to the national convention. So even though we have all these primaries in all the different states and you have candidates that are winning, there's still a caucus held where we decide who's going to go to the national convention and actually choose the leader of that party. And that didn't happen until this summer. So the Democratic National Convention was actually supposed to be in Milwaukee, which was a huge deal because it brings in thousands of people from all over the country. It didn't happen because of COVID, but normally that convention would be all those political people getting together and deciding who's going to be our candidate. So Joe Biden was chosen. They did a virtual convention, and the Republican convention, even though Trump was kind of a wash-in, they still held the convention and they have to elect him as the person that's going to run for president. So going back to this little image of the maze, yeah, like before you even get to here, the electoral college system, you have to run as a candidate, get through the primaries, get the caucus then sends people to the convention who are ultimately going to vote for you to be the candidate. That's not to be president, it's just to be the candidate. So this explains it a little bit more. A primary election within a party to pick the party's candidates. So, these were just some of the people that were running for the Democratic ticket. And there was actually a man that opposed Trump for the Republican ticket. And there were some people that thought that we should have a different candidate than Trump. But the president in years past has always won. Now, there are 2 types of primaries. There's a closed primary and an open primary. I'll start with the open. That's a little bit easier. Anyone who votes can go and vote in a primary. So our primaries were, I think, in April in Wisconsin. So if I wanted to go vote for a candidate, I could go vote for a candidate, and then that would be, and I don't remember which candidate won Wisconsin, but I could have voted for Biden or Warren or one of those other people. I see Bernie Sanders on there. So I could have voted for any of them. The other one is a closed primary. And a closed primary would be the only people that can vote are people that are registered for that party. So I could only vote if I was registered as a Democrat to vote for the Democratic primary. Versus if I was registered as a Republican, I could only vote for Republicans. And then this is showing you primary states versus caucus states. So different ways of voting. And then I'll tell you just a reason why an open primary is maybe a good thing is because when I voted 4 years ago in the primary, I did actually go and vote. There are a couple things going on. There was a referendum for the school, which is one of the reasons I went out and voted. The second one was I didn't actually vote for any of the Democratic candidates because I was probably going to vote Democrat. I voted against somebody that was running for the Republican Party to hope that my vote would count against that person so that person didn't get to run for president. So that's how it can work with the primary system. These are states with open primaries. So Wisconsin is one of them. And then this, like I said, is primary versus caucus states. Some of them are both. And then you have your general election. So the general election is every 4 years. That's when you're going to vote for a president and your congressperson and a lot of local offices also. So after the president, after the presidential candidates go through the primary, caucuses, and convention, then they actually run in the general election. And that's all the ads that we've seen going on since this summer have been because we knew Biden and President Trump would be the candidates. We talked a little bit about the Electoral College then. So you have your general election. People vote. The Electoral College decides who's going to get the most votes. And you need that magic number of 270 out of 538. So when you're watching, if you guys watch the election stuff, that'll be happening next Tuesday, by evening, because most of the polls close by 7 or 8 at night, by evening, you'll see, probably on the bottom of your screens, that President Trump has won South Dakota. And it'll say, so they've won, 4 Electoral College votes. Or Joe Biden has won the state of New York because he got this many votes, so there's no way that President Trump could win. So you'll see that, and you'll look at that magic number of 270, and you'll hear the newscasters talking about that. This is in your worksheet. So I'm going to say, this is a basic overview. This is where you might want to go into your book. If you can't answer those questions, you can go in your book and look at that. How do you declare your candidacy? Well, you have to have so many signatures or something to that effect in order to be able to even run for president. But anyone can run for president as long as they meet the qualifications of being 35, a natural born citizen, and having lived in the United States for 14 years. We use an open primary in Wisconsin. Where are the conventions held? Well, this year it was supposed to be Milwaukee and Florida, and they got changed. So I can't tell you exactly where they were this year, but it's a big deal. The general election is held. The Electoral College must get to 270 votes. If no candidate receives 270 votes, Congress votes to determine which candidate becomes president. So let's say there was an independent candidate running that got 50 Electoral College votes. Congress would actually have to decide who wins the presidency then. This has never happened, but that's what would be the next step. Absentee voting. You guys have heard probably a lot about this. If you watch the news at all, or early voting, you can actually, in Wisconsin, you could mail in your ballot if you wanted to, or you can vote ahead of time if you register for that. So if you had registered as an absentee voter, it means you can go to your polling place ahead of time and vote. Or there's certain places around that you can vote. And that would be like, let's say I planned a trip and I was going to be out of the state of Wisconsin in November, the first week of November, but I still wanted to vote. Well, I could either mail it in or I could do absentee voting ahead of time. And your book goes into that also. But just know when you guys turn 18, if you can't make it to the polls, you can still vote. There's lots of ways to do it. You just have to plan for it ahead of time. In Wisconsin, you do have to register. All you need to do that is an ID, a state ID, and something showing where you live. It can be a bill or something like that. The state ID is free if you go to the DMV and say that you're getting it for voting purposes. So they tried to make it a little bit easier for people to get that ID. I believe if you're a full-time college student, your college ID would work too, as long as you have like a place of residency. But don't quote me on that, but there are a couple other things. Or if you're a veteran or in the armed forces, you can use your military ID. But in Wisconsin, you have to register. Not all states require registration, but not all states require an ID. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on that?
No.
No? All right. So keep working on your executive branch organizer. And there's a quiz. So I'll show you where that is. There's a quiz on chapter 10. It's just hanging out here. You won't see this book quiz, but it's chapter 10 quiz. And you will see that before each question, there's a number. And that number just refers to there's 1, 2, or 3. It just refers to which section in your book it goes with. So if it's 1, it would be lesson 1. If it's 2, it's lesson 2. And if it's 3, it's lesson 3. So it's a book quiz. So you guys can take a look at that. And then just if you can do it by Friday, that would be great. I think it's 16 points. And that'll be the only quiz that you have this week. There was an Ed puzzle for yesterday on the Electoral College. And then I'm going to try and have your test up by this weekend. So if you want to work on it over the weekend, you can. Otherwise, Monday in class, you'll have time to take the test. And if you haven't taken the test from legislative branch, you're really going to want to get that one done.
So this test is over chapters 8, 9, and 10, right?
Yep. No, 9, 10, and 11. 9, 10,
and 11?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's what that this organizer, the executive branch organizer,
Yep.
that's what it's on.
Okay. Are we able to use that just like we were
Absolutely.
able to use the note sheets?
Absolutely. Yep, you can use that. I'm pretty open to whatever sources that you use to take the test. As long as you're taking it, that makes me happy. So,
okay.
Yep. And it's, once again, this is more of like a book test that's coming up. So it'll be more like questions that if you fill out this organizer, which is right from your book, it's coming from. But do remember that some of the multiple choice questions might require you to be able to explain something in your head in order to answer the question. That's why, there's how questions or explained questions. So it's not just definitions. Make sure, so for the how does the president fulfill the roles? Well, as head of state, they perform ceremonial functions. What does that mean? Like, you have to know what those things mean to answer some of the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not, I try not to make it hard, but it just shows me that you understand the unit going forward. So, okay, I'm gonna stop my screencast